Hey, welcome back to another episode of Transitions from War. I'm your host, Mike Ergo, a Marine Corps veteran. I've returned from Iraq and faced the challenges of PTSD, addiction, and grief to create a life that is balanced and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. Each episode, I'll share my journey or interview inspiring veterans and subject matter experts to help us find that purpose and connection we all crave. Y'all can follow the show on Instagram at Transitions from War. Join our TFW page on Facebook, Twitter, and transitionsfromwar.com. If you have questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to email me, Mike at transitionsfromwar.com. And if you enjoy the show, you guys, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Okay, so today my guest is Dr. Shauna Springer, aka Doc Springer. She's a licensed psychologist and author of the books Warrior, Beyond the Military, and Marriage for Equals. Shauna and I have been colleagues and friends for the better part of the decade, and she is here today to talk about her newest book, Warrior, and why it is important now more than ever to competently serve those who have served. You guys are going to like this one, so without anything else, let's get to the episode. Well, we have Dr. Shauna Springer, aka Doc Springer, back, my friend Shauna. So Shauna, welcome back to the podcast. I'm really glad you're back here, and it's awesome to know you.
Thanks, Mike. It's so good to see your face, and not the same as being in the same room, but really good to connect with you and do this. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, it is definitely not the same, but it's better than phone, and it's better than nothing at all. So
Yep,
it's at least we can see each other over a video screen.
for sure.
So you've had a pretty big week, in some good and some bad ways. You just came out with a book, and the other stuff that's happening has to do with why you wrote the book. So where do you want to start? Let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I've had a week where I've had peak highs in terms of feeling really supported. There's just been such an outburst of support for my new book, Warrior, more than I ever expected. People just posting on Facebook and sharing on their LinkedIn and all of the social media stuff that I'm not very good at. I just kind of said, I'm not good at this, and this is not about me, and I need to get this out. And with some basically a chastening from some warriors who said, you just need to get this out there. You wrote this for us, now get it out there. I did ask people for help, and they're responding, and that was really warming my heart. And at the same time, I'll try not to get emotional, but the day that I brought my book out, there were 2 notifications of suicides that day, of people that called and were devastated by a suicide of another brother in arms. And 10 minutes ago I just learned about another one. And so the reason why I wrote this book is to try and reach people and give them insight and stop the loss of people that are irreplaceable. And so I feel such a tremendous urgency now to get this out there. And it is a very mixed feeling right now to have the book coming out, but also to see, there are ones that I'm not saying I could have saved them, but the insights in the book and the deployment of those in the tribe of those you love and trust, it saves lives. And there were some we couldn't reach.
Yeah, and it sounds like it reinforces just how important it was for you to get this book out there. Why do you think suicides are increased now, or is it something that we just are paying more attention to now, and it's always been a problem with the veteran, the warrior community?
Researchers will tell us, rightfully so, that we don't have the research. The reality is that we are making decisions now when we don't have the information. And in all likelihood, mental health issues, addictions, and suicide risk will go up for some people during this time of crisis. We have plenty of data that suggests that this is what happens during crises like this. I do the podcast with Dwayne France for Seeking the Military Suicide Solution with Military Times. And he said the other week, with suicide research, we are trying to make decisions based on intelligence that's 18 months old. So I'm not going to wait on the research. In my immediate circle of friends and colleagues and network, I've gotten 5 suicide notifications in the past few weeks. So maybe that's a coincidence, but to me, it is logical that for some people, the nature of this trauma is echoing prior traumas. And there's so many overlaps between the themes of what's happening now and what people have experienced that for some people, it's exacerbating their symptoms and putting them at risk.
Can you give us an overview of what you cover in Warrior and why it's so important to get it out to the veteran community?
What Warrior covers is a huge range of topics, basically 10 years of what I've learned in walking with warriors and 10 years of insights and things that we can do to better support those who serve us. Um, the goal of the book was to bridge the divide between the civilian and the military worlds by helping those who love warriors, who care about them, to understand our warriors better and how to support them. And then, of course, I didn't plan this, of course, but the timing of everything coming out right now, with what is going on with the global health crisis, has actually forced the divide to kind of close in the sense that everyday Americans that have never served in the military are currently experiencing traumas and stressors that are similar to many who have served in the military. And the themes that are coming up as far as COVID threat and the traumas that I've been working with for 10 years are so parallel that there's much in the book that is totally relevant to all of us right now,
Mm.
which is why I've been kind of doing some pieces for the media. That'll be some of them have come out, some of them later this month. I worked on a piece with Vice that's going to come out around trauma and frontline responders and other topics. So the short answer is it covers, survivor guilt, moral injury, what trauma really is, how do you build trust with people, um, how do you um, how do you engage people in meaningful care and really learn the story behind the story of their deeper trauma, not just the stuff that they saw that's horrifying or shocking, but more deep than that, the stuff that fills them with shame, the stuff that eats them alive, and they might never tell us if we don't have that trust. It talks about relationships. It talks about suicide and suicide prevention. I'm taking on firearms risk and how to have conversations with firearms owners that are respectful and effective. Grief. It's just sort of everything I wish I had known, 10 years ago when I started working with warfighters.
Yeah. It's interesting. I want to stay for a second with the talking about guns because that's a big misunderstanding I think that most providers have, and I think there's a big fear around them, and it seems to default to take all the guns away, and that only seems like it alienates the vets we're serving and trying to work with. Can you say a little bit more about that and where it goes wrong and what you think is the right way to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does. It illustrates the rift between the civilian and military cultures in a sense, because, the those who would say, well, guns are, firearms are a risk. They're right. They're not wrong. I mean, there's solid research based on that. But the approach that is taken to move on that intelligence is an approach that causes veterans, I think, to never show up for care in the first place, to drop out of care when they're asked these intrusive, overreaching, disrespectful, culturally deaf questions about firearms. Um, People don't realize the degree to which many service members, not all, have an identity that is linked to their ownership and the privilege of owning firearms and using them as a tool meant for the protection of themselves and others they love. They don't understand that taking a firearm away from somebody or even suggesting that that might be a good course of action is linked up psychologically with a power move that someone does who has positional authority and military rank who can remove your firearm in the military. And if that happens, that there's just so much shame and alienation from the tribe that can come from that. So we are taught to kind of ask those questions right up front in our screenings before we have trust built with our patients. I don't have to say, I just think this is happening. I actually had a veteran who was at Berkeley that Brian Vargas. He polled 70 veterans across 3 local college campuses. I don't know if you took place in that study because Brian knows, and it was, I think, anonymous anyway. But we got 70 responses. He came back in, and half of those who he surveyed said, if a clinician that I did not know well asked me if I even own firearms, then I would not return for another treatment session. I would drop out of care.
Yeah.
So there's a huge disconnect, and the approach that we're taking, I think, is actually increasing risk for suicide because it's causing people to avoid care or drop out of care that could be life saving if we pursued it more respectfully and more appropriately to our population.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as well intentioned as you do, and it's just it seems like it amps things up and creates more fear, and it goes against what it's trying to do. It's counterproductive because I never even considered just the parallels between having your rifle taken away while serving an active duty. And yeah, I mean, that hit me just thinking about what that would be like. The absolute shame of like, if I don't have my rifle, then I'm worthless to the unit. What can I possibly do? I mean, I,
Yep.
I can't run up and karate kick everybody in my way. That's not going to work. So, uh,
Lost your core vital function.
yes.
If as a Marine, every Marine rifleman, right, Mike? Every Marine rifleman, if they take your firearm away, then it's loaded with such shame and alienation for people who are in the military. And it brings all of that emotionally loaded content up every time a clinician starts going down that path, unless they're very careful, very culturally attuned, and very respectful.
What do you think some of the missteps are when providers or support or trying to care for veterans when it comes to building trust?
Well, the first thing that's a misstep, I think, is just our understanding of who we are to veterans. And I covered this in a course I released with Psych Armor, and when I was at TAPS, it was based on the second chapter of my book, and it was about overcoming barriers to care. And the point that I made is that when veterans come into care, so many times they're ambivalent. They're looking for a reason to never come back. They are often coming to care because they had a spouse or a partner or family member tell them they really should go get care. And so you have to wonder, why that is. Now, I had worked with a very kind of affluent, successful civilian group of patients in a private practice before I ever worked with veterans. So I had a good counterpoint. And my patients, when I had private practice, they were eager to come in for those sessions. They were happy to pay, whatever rate to have time to think about themselves and reflect on their next moves in life and strategize for the future. And if that was really what I wanted, was a career that was comfortable for me, where I looked like the patients I served, then I would have stayed with that. But it gave me a really interesting comparison group. So when I started working with veterans, and I thought, oh, I have skilled, I have a set of skills to bring to the table here, and I'm going to come and I'm going to serve them with these skills. I was quickly brought up short when I realized that to them, coming in, I was the FNG, and you know what that
Yeah.
means, the fracking new guy, right?
Yeah.
However we want to say it.
You can say it
Um,
however you want on this podcast. No holds barred.
you don't censor. Um, yeah, for Marines by Marines. So yeah, no, coming in, I had a huge deficit of trust. I wasn't even coming in neutral. And to the degree that I led with my credentials or my degrees or my years in school, I was actually putting myself at a disadvantage. Um, and then there's also people in the military, have a different role. They have a different calling. They're not wrong. They have a dual mission. So they're not really there to have service members back in terms of wellness and their health.
Right.
They're also there to not only do that, but look out for readiness, right? Readiness to go to deploy, troop readiness. And so they're going to be screening for problems. And so the interactions that people have with service providers in the military are not generally just purely supportive therapy. It just can't be.
Right.
So they come into a VA, let's say, or aftercare after discharge, and they have this sense of providers as people who hunt for problems and document them with consequences for that service member, as opposed to having a model of supportive therapy, which many of my patients really didn't have. So I had to realize that and sort of create that framework for them and build that trust, not just from neutral, but from a deficit.
Yeah. So you're starting behind already. Most people come into it, you're right, looking for a reason not to come back. I imagine just sitting there, just waiting, like, say one wrong thing so I can have the excuse I need not to come back. And I can tell people at least I tried, but then I'm done. And it seems like a lot of
Yeah.
people um, would really grab onto anything. So we're those of us who provide services to veterans or at a deficit that way, unless we are culturally competent.
Or we're culturally curious and humble.
Yeah.
I think cultural competence is a difficult thing, really, for all of us to achieve. We should take pains to learn. You and I, years ago, we started doing essentially what are now culturally competent seminars for the new psychology trainees. And that's kind of been something we've done together. But as we also would agree, I'm sure that you can't know everything about every branch of service.
Oh, right.
And right.
Yeah. Not even
And
close.
so, and even, thinking you do is a danger, because the things you might think about your particular ethos or branch of service, or the, values that led, the branch that you were in, might play out differently in different branches. So it can actually create blind spots. But absolutely, people who have served, I think, have an advantage in building trust, even though they may sometimes have blind spots. And people that are civilians like myself trying to come in and serve veterans have a kind of double handicap around building trust. And so we start pretty deep in the hole, and realizing that I was deep in the hole early on in my career in the VA helped me really think about, how do I build trust with somebody that probably doesn't ever want to see me again the first time they walk in my office.
What are some of the things you did to establish yourself as someone who could be trusted? Because you have a reputation in the veteran community as the civilian who gets it, the person who can be trusted, and that's not an easy thing to earn. I think a lot of clinicians in the VA and outside try to get there, but never do during a career. So, what are some of those things you did?
Some of it is probably more credit to the way my parents raised me, even though I never served in the military. People that are in the military really feel like home to me, because my childhood was in some ways like an extended form of boot camp. So I think there's some recognition in each other, even though I've never served, of some background that might have some similarities in some ways, in terms of discipline and values that I live by, that I've always lived by. Um, my sort of early training before I was ever in formal school, and the traveling and international service work I did before I was ever in a position to serve veterans helps me. But I also think, where I really had to swim upstream, having gone to undergraduate at Harvard, frankly, is uh, the idea of taking that socialization of being the expert and realizing that I needed to lay all of that aside, and really understand that trust outranks rank. And my rank is, it doesn't matter. I don't have any rank with somebody who has been in a foreign country doing things that most of us can't possibly imagine. um, Rank doesn't matter. I don't have rank there. So just coming in and being open and taking off any armor that I would have used. It was the only way to build trust. And I continue to try to develop myself to be able to work in a way that's um, strong but without armor. And I think that's something that people, I guess, identify with, or I don't know.
I was thinking about it as you were talking too. One of the reasons so many of us trust you is just that you talk with us, not at us, and you you talk on the same level. I've worked with people who have talked down to veterans or talked down as the expert in the room, and like you're
Yeah.
saying, that doesn't build trust. And I think people can sniff that, and there's a certain level of it just doesn't feel good. It really doesn't feel good. But I never got that from you, and I think that's probably one of the keys to your success as well. So why'd you decide to write this book? Why now, with so many other books out there about veterans?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because I'm really curious. Because you have known me for better part of 10 years. And you knew me when I was kind of first getting my feet under me at the VA.
Yes.
When we first met, and you were at the vet center and I was at the VA, and there was that whole thing that we decided to just push through, which was this idea that the vet center is different from the VA, and we're two different insular systems, and we thought that was not going to serve the veterans we were serving. So we started doing groups, and you started helping me train the psychology trainees, and like there, I mean, I was like, let's bring Mike in. What do I know? Who am I to give this lesson in cultural competence about the Marine Corps and what it's like to be in combat? And you saw me in those early days when I was kind of probably fumbling and trying to find my way. How do you think I've changed over the 10 years as I've kind of come into an understanding of how to be worthy of trust?
Well, I think there's some things that didn't change, and that's good because I think there's something about you that's very genuine and working with and actually listening. Um, Things that are basic skills, but I think get overshadowed by um, all the technical skills and modalities that therapists learn and techniques. But my experience with you is that you spoke to me as a peer, as an equal, um, even
Hmm.
though your education and training far exceeds, mine in mental health. And I really appreciated that. And I really appreciated just if you didn't know something, you asked me about it. You let me know, and you didn't, bullshit me about things that you didn't know. And I think that I know vets can smell that from a mile away.
Yeah.
I think what
Yeah.
has changed is that you have experience. You're far more culturally competent just by being around vets, and you understand the language, the dialect. You understand the culture a whole lot more, so you don't have to ask as many questions. But the good part about you, one of the great parts about you, out of many, is that you still ask questions when you need to.
Hmm. Yeah, I still have a lot of questions. And I think, learning how to be as a part of the circle wouldn't have happened just in the clinical setting. If I had stayed kind of in my office and seen people in that kind of a structured, kind of clinical way, there's so much I would have missed. It's really been the extramural activities of deploying a couple of times with Team Rubicon, joining VSOs for local events that honor and support veterans,
Right.
working with them, and like with you in different capacities. I see you as an equal because I see you that way, and I know that I was in school for a long time and had training that I can draw from, but there's also lived experience, and that's a form of training that I deeply value based on how I was raised. It's really important to me that what I share is not coming from a strictly academic perspective,
Hmm.
but is also informed by kind of lived experience. And you have so much lived experience that's so valuable to share that the combination is really what I think makes people effective.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, so I was thinking, so yes, if you had stayed within the VA, you'd have seen veterans for 1 hour out of their week of how many hours. And when you got out and started working with other organizations, you got to see vets in their natural habitat,
Yeah.
throwing axes at trees, starting bonfires, roasting pigs, smoking cigars. I mean, all you really got a taste of the culture that vets would not bring into the VA in a session.
And it's been so fun,
Yeah.
it's been so much fun. Like axe throwing, or um, all the different things, roasting pigs that we've kind of been part of.
Yeah.
It's just been such a fun ride that, you know, no matter sort of where things go with me and, taking insights that I've learned and helping people with trauma, veterans are always going to be my heart and a big part of what I do. That's never going to change because it's just the tribe is so special to me, and I feel so honored to be included as much as I have been in the fun that we have.
Yeah, and tribe's a great word, and I think a lot of us draw so much inspiration from Sebastian Junger's work and his book Tribe, and just how he explained how close and how strong those bonds are. What do you want people to come away with when they read your book?
I want them to, every few pages have a realization about something they thought they knew that maybe is very different from what they were thinking. And for it to shift them gradually and in a large scale way from the way that we currently support those who serve us, to understand those warriors much more deeply, and then to understand each other much more deeply and how we need to turn to our tribe whether we've served in the military or not. I have, as you know, been greatly influenced as well by Sebastian Junger's work and his movies and his books and writing and tribe, and it's the tribe that we turn to that makes life meaningful and that saves many of us. Whether we have spiritual faith as part of our strength or not, that can be a great help to many of us. But tribe is something that all of us can create and maintain that gives us a life worth living.
Who specifically is this book for? Is this for spouses and partners, or is this more for providers?
Yeah, it's actually for several groups, which is challenging, when you're writing a
Yeah,
book. And I
span
was
that.
I was told pick one population, and I decided to rebel and try and write it for warriors themselves to benefit from each other's insight. I look at myself as somebody who has reached a level of trust and insight because of what people have shared with me that I have the ability now to kind of package it together and share it out with those who serve for their own benefit. And then there are the people that love warriors in their families, their home front tribe that wants to know how to support them and wants to understand them and where they're struggling and where they may be hiding their pain. This book will share about that. The policymakers and researchers that are making high level decisions about what's best for veterans would benefit from hearing from them
Yeah,
in this way that kind of packages it all together and talks about these issues they're facing beyond just the trauma we focused on the last 10 years. There's also, the people that are clinicians, that are healers, who want to learn how to become docs and kind of move off of the stance of being doctors and really transform their practice, as I've been doing and so continue to do, into being trusted docs.
yeah,
And I wrote it for really all of us. At the end of the day, every chapter ends with universal principles I learned from working with warriors, and I break down 4 or 5 things that I learned from walking with people in their suffering and moving people towards hope. And then I ask questions to help us all reflect on our own lives and the quality of our connections and how we build tribe and lives worth meaning. So all of the content right now with COVID actually feels really urgent to me and really relevant. So I know that sounds really grandiose, like I wrote this book for everyone, but in a way, when I think about it, I did have different populations kind of that I had in mind in terms of what I was trying to reach.
yeah. And one thing you said I want to key on and ask you about is What's the difference between being a doctor and being a doc?
Yeah, so early in the book, I think it's even the first chapter, start with the premise that when I came into the VA system, and there are docs in the VA system. I'm not saying that there aren't any for sure. In fact, the guy that I replaced was a doc. He was a trusted doc, so I had to overcome that deficit. There are some really good people in the VA, but I was a doctor when I came in. I thought I knew what I knew, and I thought I had all this expertise, and I had this, successful private practice where I was well paid, and felt something really was missing in terms of my heart for service, and decided to enlist in the VA, for lack of a better word, for 8 years. I was there 8 years to the day. Decided I would do that no matter what they did to me, because my personality isn't really suited in some ways towards working in a more bureaucratic, larger system.
Right.
But I was there for two enlistments, and I was a doctor, and so getting cut down pretty quickly made me really take a hard look at how I build trust with this very different population. And I decided that I needed to make some huge changes if I wanted to be of service to the people I was to support. So, docs are people that, as people have explained to me, that you have a deep trust in, that maybe you would trust with your life, that you don't question their character because you know their heart and you know that they have a level of skill. And so there's a confidence and a trust there that you have with a doc that you don't necessarily have with a doctor. A doctor has a formal degree. They should have, skills and the ability to help you, but not all doctors are docs. And it's not really about the degree. To be clear, there are some docs that are social workers, marriage and family therapists. Like, I'm not really focused on the doctoral degree. I'm talking about how we build and maintain trust with those we support. So, broadly, I would say there are doctors and there are docs. And my book is in part about how do you become a trusted doc.
Yeah, I like that. Well, whew, what have we not covered? What what are we forgetting here?
Um, let's talk about what's happening right now to veterans, if we could,
Yeah.
and on the front lines.
What do you think is going on right now that's unique about this global pandemic and global health crisis that's and how it's affecting veterans?
So it's interesting because among the veterans in my network, there have been kind of opposite reactions. Some veterans are saying, this is familiar and I've been through much worse. And so I can survive this, and I know who my tribe is and I know who I need to stay close to. And they're actually doing really well. Um, I did a CBS Ion Veterans radio program a couple weeks ago with a Marine named Weber, who I was with when all this COVID stuff broke down. And he's doing better than he's ever done. You can hear it in his voice and just how well he's coping with all of this. So he's a good example of that. And then there are others that I've been hearing from, and clearly, getting the multiple suicide notifications, which is just heartbreaking. There are people for whom this trauma echoes other traumas that are unresolved. So, trauma itself doesn't necessarily produce PTSD or a trauma reaction. But I think the helplessness and the nature of um, the trauma and the lack of resolution around a previous trauma can really leave somebody in a vulnerable state. And so if you think about some of those parallels, like there's, this invisible enemy that you have to be hyper vigilant, 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
and there's life or death stakes, somebody could get infected. It's like there could be a bomb in the road that you don't see. It's like invisible and something could blow up. Your family member could get sick and you could lose somebody you love, without preparing yourself or knowing that that was going to happen. Then your grief could be cut off because they would suddenly be evacuated from your life. And so you have this traumatic grief, as well as, having to be bunkered in your house, having some scarcity of supplies is very well known. And then some of the other factors are like looking around, I think, at other people and seeing them shift a little bit to having a more sort of fear based reaction to each other.
Right, like you're
People are
walking and
not,
people go to the other side of the
yeah,
street. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, exactly. People are not making eye contact when you go on walks. They are not talking to each other. They're not seeing each other in the same way. And I think to many veterans, that's reminiscent of being in countries where there's a collective level of trauma, where people they're uneasy around each other and they
Yeah.
don't really know who to trust.
Yeah.
Um,
The the other thing that strikes me about this is that as opposed to other crises like natural disasters, you see people coming together to like rebuild houses or help each other clean the wreckage. This we can't get together and we can't come together as a team. We have to stay separate, and so it increases the isolation and the sense of being alone, which I think cannot
yeah,
cannot be helpful.
it's really unhelpful. We were already in a fairly disconnected society before this happened. My husband and I were watching last night a football recap, and it wasn't live, obviously, but just sitting there like, normally, I mean, to be honest, and I'm just, for myself, like football is on and I kind of enjoyed it in a peripheral way,
Yeah.
but it's not like not like a huge, fan
Yeah.
of like football. I mean, it's fine. My husband played at Harvard, so we have the game on and um it's fun. But last night I was like, this is so nice because it feels normal. It just feels like familiar sounds in the background and the game is on. And I also had this sadness because I was watching it and thinking about all these fans. They can't be together anymore. They
Yeah.
just like, you can't have a football game like that. And all these athletes that are like smashing up against each other with like hot breath and like, sweat, like that can't happen right now. And when is that going to be able to happen? And if I find myself craving football, like something has really, changed.
Yeah.
Um,
No kidding.
Nothing can happen
There,
right now.
there's something that is, and I'm walking through this thought as I speak, but when there's a known distance or a known duration, you can mentally gauge yourself, for how long you're going to have to go. And I always use the analogy of endurance sports. You know what mile you're on and where the finish line is. And within a
Mhm.
deployment, you know generally, unless you get extended, how long it's going to be and when you're coming home. So this is undetermined. And that is really a challenge for the mind because the mind can't quantify how much effort to put out or how what pace to go at. And so that the back and forth
Yeah,
that goes on in the mind with this undetermined length of this global health crisis has to just exacerbate a lot of the symptoms people are having.
absolutely right. The way I've been kind of saying that similar concept is that anxiety goes viral when much is unknown,
Yeah.
and everything is unknown right now. You don't know, what the road ahead might hold. Your energy, by the way, is so much lower and better than mine right now. I'm just like aware of that. Um, you know me, if I have one more cup of coffee than just one, I'm like really amped up.
Well, you
Um,
have the advantage of seeing me after I did a brutal spin session. Uh, so my energy was really drained out of my legs today. So
oh,
I'm
okay.
pretty spent. Yeah.
Yeah, you are like really zen right now, and I'm aware that I'm really just upset and trying to channel my helpless rage and frustration with the suicide losses I've been hearing
Yeah.
about into getting this book out. And I actually need your help with something.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to promote this book for me because there is a fear that people will misunderstand my intentions and think I'm just trying to sell books. And so I feel that push pull in me to get this out and also the fear that somebody's going to misread what this is about for me.
Yeah.
And I could use your help with that and kind of speaking to that. And I'll try and hold your words, as I try to go forward.
One of the challenges that people like you with a heart of service face is the discomfort of being in the spotlight, even when the work you're producing will go to help so many people. And I think that as opposed to people who are all too happy to be in the spotlight and promote their work to point to them in an ego based way, what you're doing is because I know you and I have all the trust in the world in you. It's to go to help people because I've seen the work you've done with people and genuinely care. And how is that for you to wrestle with knowing that you're going to help people with this book, but just the perception that people can have of someone coming out with a book and selling a product?
Yeah, it's hard. It is really a struggle, and there's a friction that I feel. Every time I send out an announcement about the book, it's uncomfortable for me. Um, even doing like public speaking, like I've done a lot of it in the past 3 years, and half the time I still break out into hives, and it's deeply uncomfortable. But I've been told recently to really
Mm.
get over it and just realize that the value of what I'm able to share based on the trust that's been invested in me and the insights that have been shared with me, in combination with my training, is valuable enough that I shouldn't stand in my own way. And so I think where I've landed on that is I'm going to try to be as bold as I can be. And when somebody misreads my character or attacks me, which is bound to happen, um, I mean, this is not a safe book, right? It's talking about suicide. I'm relaying some stories that happened to me at different times in the VA, not to make the VA look bad, certainly. There are lots of docs in the VA as well, but because they happened and they are illustrative of points I need to make.
Yeah.
So I'm bracing myself for the inevitable pushback when you try and put a message out there.
That's when you
And
know
I
you're doing good work and you're making you have something interesting to say, is when it strikes people and there are people that will send less than ideal messages back to you because you're striking a chord. If anybody, any song, any like pop song or any book that everybody likes is almost inherently boring
mm,
because it doesn't challenge people's thinking or their beliefs. And that's what people, that's the whole idea of higher learning and college is to go seek that, have your viewpoints challenged. So I think the fact that this is going to strike some nerves is just more proof that you're on the right track 100%.
thank you. And if somebody is like, when, not if, but when people are really attacking me, if people like you and people that know my heart were to stand up for me and respond, um, that would be such a help to me, because the most uncomfortable part has been sometimes just feeling like, do I respond? Do I just like absorb that blow? Do I take the gut punch, or can I respond back? And the third way is to have somebody who is not me, who just wants to see this come forward, to say, no, that's not right. You just, you
Yeah.
don't have the experience to know what this is about. It's really not about what you think.
Exactly. And that's the strength of the tribe, is that when one member is attacked, the others come to the aid, and they're stronger than any one person could be on their own. So
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to need my tribe in this.
yeah.
I'm feeling very vulnerable. It feels very urgent, and I feel like I'm sticking my neck way out there, and I'm definitely going to need my tribe to have my back on this one.
Well, I rarely give advice, but one thing that has stuck with me for a long time is just some words that a gunnery sergeant shared with me. And I was struggling and having some difficulties, and he told me something that forever changed me, and that was to simply imagine building a bridge and getting the fuck over it. And that's changed how
You
I
have a
approach
bridge
life.
right behind you.
Yes.
Your virtual background is the Golden Gate Bridge, which I don't have the tech skills to accomplish over here on my end, but it looks awesome.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, your microphone disappears into the bridge, but
It's interesting, isn't it?
thank you for that. No, say that one more time. Imagine what? I want to really hold that.
I want you to imagine building a bridge and then getting the fuck over it.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad for that advice.
Yeah. It might be a Zen koan, but in all seriousness, Shauna, I really appreciate just the amount of care and intention and just genuinely trying to find the right answer and just trying to find the right solution, not just um, doing what's good enough, but doing what's right and what's good for the people you work for and work with. So um,
Thank you.
I
I
don't think
feel like we're, a long way off still. So much to learn, but yeah, I feel like there's an urgency to share at least the first 10 years of this work.
where can people find your book?
On Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, it's on Kindle as well. I understand that Amazon has a shipping delay because everything is delayed right now. Understandably, they're short staffed. So if people have a Kindle, then it's kind of an immediate thing and it's a little bit cheaper even. So yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Awesome. Well, cool. Where else can people find you?
My website. I now have a new website. It's Doc Shauna Springer, DOC Shauna Springer, all one word, which is DOCShaunaspringer, Springer, SeanSpringer.org. So if you go there, there will be information about all of my books. This is my third one, but to me, this is the most important one that I've ever written personally because of the stakes with the just the risk that everybody's under right now and the piece around suicide prevention, moral injury, grief,
Yeah.
all of that. Um,
We'll have
there's
links to all these in
also
the show notes, by the way, for everybody listening.
Yeah, thanks. There's also stuff about the Military Times podcast I do with Dwayne France every week called "Seeking the Military Suicide Solution," and information about talks and trainings and things like that that I'm able to offer if people find they have need.
Awesome. Thank you, Shauna. It's always good
Thank
to
you.
talk to you, and it's always good to have you on the show. So, everyone, go ahead and don't delay. Go out and get this book right now. I've already ordered my copy, so I'm awaiting its shipment. And I think if you know anything about Shauna, you know that this book is going to be 100% of her effort, and it's going to be something that you're going to walk away with a lot of actionable items. So pick it up. And Shauna, thank you for being here.
Thank you for doing this, Mike. Thank you.
All right, that concludes today's episode of the Transitions from War podcast with me, Mike Ergo. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. You can follow the show on Instagram at Transitions from War, join the TFW page on Facebook, Twitter, and transitionsfromwar.com. You guys, if you have questions, comments, ideas for a show, hit me up. Email me, Mike at transitionsfromwar.com. And if you guys enjoyed the show, just take a couple seconds. Take a couple seconds right now to leave a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us get more exposure while we try to reach as many vets as possible. It's important. And of course, if you have friends who you think might like the show, please be sure to share it with them. All right, guys, that's it for now. So thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, drink water, meditate, and kill bodies. Hey,